Welcome, listeners, to the InFAWmation Nation, brought to you by the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, Division of Fish and Wildlife Hunter Education Program. Today, we have with us Dana Kopek, who will be doing our editing and our recording. And of course, I'm Scott Travers, the host of the show, the Hunter Education Coordinator for the state of Rhode Island. As always, we're coming to you from the Outdoor Education Office located in Exeter, Rhode Island. And the focus of our podcast is on hunting, hunter education, fishing, and aquatic education, and all things wildlife outreach related in the state of Rhode Island. In this episode, we're going to be talking with the Rhode Island Division of Fish and Wildlife's fishery biologist, Kenneth Casey Fernstrom. So welcome, Casey. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm a lifelong Rhode Island resident. I've been in the hatchery system since 1998. I have two children, two girls. I have a 11-year-old and a 13-year-old girl that both love fishing and love daddy working at the fish hatchery.
That's fantastic. So now, in becoming a fisheries biologist, was that like a lifelong dream of yours?
No. I started right out of high school. I started as a seasonal employee at the hatcheries, and I've loved it ever since. I've worked my way up from the bottom, all up to be able to run the program. But no, I think as a kid, actually, I wanted to be governor.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I went a totally different route.
I bet you're happier in your position now than you would be if you were the governor.
Probably a lot less stress, especially right now.
No doubt. Incredible. So did you go through any type of education or schooling to get into the position that you're in today?
So I've been going to school solely my entire adult career. I started with I went to school in Vermont to just concentrate on fish culture. I did that for a while, and then I've been doing classes at the local colleges for the last 10 years. Back then, when I first started, education was, you needed education, but they wanted experience. So the fact that I worked from the bottom allowed me still to keep moving up in my career. Now, it's a little different. You have to have the degree before you, and the experience means a little less.
Gotcha. So you have that great perspective that you are familiar with all different positions and all the things involved with hatchery management because you started at that ground level.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
So I can talk to my employees and say, I've done it. I've done it all. So I'm never going to ask you something I've never done.
Right. Gotcha. Oh, that's awesome. That must make you a great leader for your staff.
I hope so.
So what is the function of the hatchery system in Rhode Island?
Well, the hatchery system is able to support the anglers of the state. Without us, we wouldn't have rainbow trout, the brown trout. We have a point-and-take fishery because most of our water gets pretty warm, so it doesn't sustain trout through the summer. So we're able to put 100,000 fish out a year for us to catch, for the sportsmen to go out there and catch.
Gotcha. So that's a large number. Is that about the same number of fish you put out every single year?
They do fluctuate a bit based on size. So we've been concentrating on getting bigger fish, and the bigger the fish, the less fish we're able to put out because we are still constrained with how much room we can grow the fish in the hatcheries.
Right. Gotcha.
So if you want to look at pounds, the pounds are always the same. The pounds is about 150,000 pounds a year.
Wow, that's amazing. When you put the fish out, do you put them in the same spots every year, or does that vary a little bit?
So we put them in the same fishing locations every year. The numbers do change because with social media out there, we're able to hear from people a lot easier and find out what spots are more popular than others. Like, for example, I never knew how popular Willett Pond was. So Willett Pond has gotten a little extra fish over the years because of how popular it is.
Gotcha. Fantastic.
Not that we not take away fish from other places, but...
Right, you just give it a little more attention in that particular area.
Correct.
Gotcha. So you do allow for public commentary and input.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think it's one of our best tools we have right now. You know, we hear a lot of things. We want to hear from different people, not just the same person over and over saying the same thing. Because sometimes there's nothing we can do about it. Like we have, Rhode Island has a blue-green algae problem. It happens every year at Melville Pond. We know people love Melville Pond, but we're not going to stock it with blue-green algae in it.
Gotcha. So that blue-green algae that you are speaking about, can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's a bacteria. Um, it creates an unhealthy environment. It doesn't necessarily really hurt the fish, but if people ate the fish, it's a possibility they could get sick from it, and we just don't want that responsibility. And we don't want to encourage people to go to those waters. People bring their pets, and the dogs jump into the water. We don't want us to be that factor that people went to that water body.
Right, makes sense. So, how can people tell whether the water that they're fishing or that they're going to has been affected by the blue-green algae?
Well, it's hard to tell. Our website will have updates because our Department of Health tests these water bodies, but you can also tell by looking at it. They have like a little bit of a haze to it. It doesn't look right. It's hard to. I guess it's really hard to explain without a picture, but um,
Gotcha. Kind of like when people would say, how can you tell when a skunk is rabid? Just by looking at it, you would know it's rabid by looking at it. So
right.
I guess it's kind of the same with the blue-green algae when it's in a water system.
Yes.
Gotcha, understood. And again, you mentioned a website that people could refer to as a resource.
Yeah. So our own website, the dem.org website. It's we don't personally do it. The Department of Health tests it, but we put it on our website to share.
Gotcha.
And we also put it on Facebook. Um,
And via social media.
yes.
So that's fantastic that we're putting the word out that way.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So I know there's more than one hatchery in Rhode Island. How many hatcheries do we have?
We have four. We have the third oldest in the country, the Carolina Trout Hatchery. That's 2 miles of raceway. That's a challenge because it's such a large facility and it's outdated. So made out of mostly wood and a lot of band-aids. We have the Perryville Hatchery, which is our smallest hatchery. Consists of a quarter-acre pond plus 6 raceways and a fry line. Then we have the most modern hatchery, the Lafayette Hatchery, where my office is. That's all made out of cement, and we have nice fencing that protects from predators. Even though that hatchery has its own, every hatchery has their own challenges. And then we have our warm water hatchery in Arcadia, Exeter. That has a small hatch house and 13 earthen ponds that we've tried various different things to raise there. We've primarily raised our Atlantic salmon fry there and our northern pike fry. But since I've been here, we've done largemouth bass there. We've done smallmouth bass there. And we also use those earthen ponds to supplement other ponds that have been destroyed because of dam problems and lost all the fish there. So we've gone in there. We were able to get like sunfish and crappie and largemouth bass out of those ponds and help restart ponds that have been destroyed.
Right, gotcha. So you're reintroducing native fish or fish from the area into those ponds.
Correct.
Wow, that's fantastic. So really, there are a lot of different species that you work with, more so than just the rainbow trout.
Yes. Trout is where it's what we specialize in, but we're getting with the Northern Pike program, we've gotten a lot better with that. The bass program we've done that takes a lot of staffing, so that's probably why we walked away from that. Other than that, there's probably not a lot of need for largemouth bass, but those fish you have to feed a ton and just be on top of. If not, they start eating each other, and that's not good.
Right, gotcha.
But the reason why we do a lot of rainbow trout, they're the easiest, they grow the fastest, and people want big fish. So we're able to raise a 1 pound rainbow trout in 14 months.
Wow.
So we can't get that with the other species. The brook trout takes us 18 months, and so does the brown trout. So that's
Gotcha.
why we go with the rainbow trout.
Right. Wow. Boy, that's incredible. Again, I didn't realize how many different species of fish that were throughout the hatchery system.
Yep. Well, we also raise golden rainbow trout, tiger trout.
Right. So you mentioned the tiger trout. So what's going on with the tiger trout program right now?
So the tiger trout, they're difficult. We can't buy them, So we have to raise them on our own. They're a hybrid. They're a cross between a brook trout and a brown trout. And some years we have good success on spawning them, and some years we don't. And unfortunately, it's all or nothing. Either we get a good eye up on our eggs, or we lose everything. And it seems like every other year we go through this process.
Right, gotcha.
And again, it's a lot of manpower involved in that because we have to take so many eggs to get such a small number of tiger trout to survive. So it's a big process, and it's also at the same time we're taking our brown trout and our brook trout and our golden trout and our rainbow trout come in, buy our rainbow trout eggs, but we'll get back to that in a second. So we have a whole bunch of stuff going on when we have the tiger trout, and since we have to have brook trout and brown trout, we kind of have to concentrate on them first and then go to the tiger trout. We just don't have the staffing for it. With the rainbow trout a little bit easier because we're able to source them out. So we buy them. We buy 100,000 eggs at a time. We get them all females. And the reason we do that because the males fight and they cause disease. So we buy all females. So everything's nice and easy. They come in eyed. They're ready to hatch. It's easy, relatively easy peasy for us.
Wow.
But the other fish, we don't have a good source of eggs to do that from. So we take our own Rowland broodstock.
Right. Okay. Wow. Has COVID affected the operation of the hatcheries at all?
It did. You figure March 2020, we're getting ready to start throwing fish out in the water, and then the governor starts shutting things down. So we kind of went into hyperdrive and really started putting the fish out. So that aspect kind of showed us how fast we could do things if necessary, and we were able to expedite that entire process. It also made us really think about hatcheries as a whole. Before, we would mix our hatcheries up a lot. When came COVID, we couldn't do that. If one person got COVID and we had a whole bunch of people together, we might not be able to run the hatchery. So we really were able to isolate our hatchery staffs so they were able to really work and specialize on their own facilities. Because at this time, we also got a few new employees. So it was also good for them, so they were able to really concentrate on their one facility that they're responsible for. That and COVID. Also, what helped us with COVID was able to. We went out and looked at all the sites for open day because we weren't looking at crowding and how many people were there. So it really gave us an understanding of where people were going fishing, which is going to help us in the long run going forward by making sure we're putting the proper amount of fish at these fisheries. But I think that's going to help us in the long term with that.
Yeah, so we're actually taking a negative thing and turning it into a positive in the long run.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. So are the hatcheries open to the public now?
Lafayette Trout is the one that's open to the public, and you can come down now. That just recently opened this spring. But the other 3 hatcheries are not open to the public.
Gotcha. Now, do you need an appointment to go to the hatchery, or should you reach out and contact someone?
No, the Lafayette Hatchery, you just come down 8:30 to 3, Monday through Friday. Someone will be there, and they can answer a few questions. If you wanted a tour, then you need to talk to our ARE department, and they would schedule a tour.
Gotcha. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't realize that you could just walk into the hatchery.
Yep.
So,
It's been late the last couple of years.
Right, yeah, of course, COVID excluded, but right. Yeah, wow, that's incredible. So, Casey, we talked about going to the Lafayette Hatchery. Just so our listeners know, where's that Lafayette Hatchery located?
It's located in Northington, 424 Hatchery Road, Northington, 02852. It's right off of Route 2 across this road from Shotner's Farms.
Cool, so it's really easy to access.
Yep, it's called Hatchery Road.
So what are the major problems facing the hatcheries in Rhode Island? I know we mentioned staffing.
Staffing's always been a problem, but it's the rebuilding of the hatcheries, especially in the Carolina hatchery. The problem is rebuilding the hatchery is that you would have to have another hatchery that will have to be able to support the fish load that because you can't do anything overnight. So if we were to shut down half of Carolina, either Perryville or Lafayette would have to make up that difference, and that's a giant challenge.
Right.
Um, and the cost of rebuilding it, saving up that kind of money, the capital. I don't know what it would cost, but it's in the millions to do just that one facility.
Right. I can imagine. You said it's almost 2 miles of raceway for the fish.
Right, and then um, that's the biggest challenge. It's rebuilding it. But I do believe once the Carolina Hatchery is such a large facility, once the Carolina Hatchery was rebuilt, we can put majority of our staff there because they would be able to take on most of the projects.
Right.
So I think it would, in the long run, it could save us time, money, but it needs to be spent properly there.
Of course. Yeah. So that does sound like a credible opportunity if we were able to get that funding in order to make that happen.
Yes.
So, wow.
And that's part of what I like to see before I retire. That at least be started.
Right. Start somewhere. Yeah, I hear you. So what is the funding source, for the hatcheries?
We get most of our off license sales and trout stamps, and we get a little bit of the gas tax from boats. So our funding's been pretty stable through the years, um, and it's gotten a little better because fishing is going up a bit. I don't have the graph in front of me, but I bet in like the late '90s we probably peaked at how many license sales we had, and then we've been dropping, and now the last 2 years we've gone up quite a bit. Definitely in the trout stamp area.
Oh, that's great. That's good news.
Yes, but which is another thing that was good about COVID is that it got people outside. They were doing different activities now. Now they're going back to the wilds and
Right.
fishing and hiking and kayaking and
Right. We've seen similar effect in the hunting area too, and bird watching as well. Mountain biking in the various management areas. Like you're saying, a lot of people are getting outdoors now.
Mm.
So, well, that's incredible. And again, it's great that people are starting to take advantage of all these resources that we have in the state of Rhode Island that maybe they weren't aware of or hadn't thought of using in the past. So, when we talk about stocking fish, I know we kind of touched on that briefly, and we said that there is a resource online to look at where we stock. What are our plans for stocking this season?
So something we started just before COVID, we started going on social media about almost real time of where we were stocking the fish. We stopped that because we didn't want the crowds. We've heard the public. You guys want that back. I'm hoping to build this fall. Hopefully, we'll be able to bring that back so you guys get real time on Facebook and Twitter when we're stocking the fish. Did I answer your question, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, what fish will we be stocking this year?
Oh, so the big stocking's already over for 2021. We'll do another stocking probably after Columbus Day, depending on the weather. We have plenty of fish, and we'll stock brook trout, rainbow trout, and rainbow trout, brook trout, and brown trout. And then we'll stock again January-ish, 2022 for some ice fishing. Hopefully we get some ice. That one, probably only 10 places to get fish because we're not stocking rivers. We'll be stocking ponds that could possibly have ice. And then we'll start spring program in March, which we'll do everything we have. We'll do the rainbow trout, the golden trout, Atlantic salmon, which has been a pretty big hit recently. We've started raising, I know I'm kind of jumping what we're doing here, but we've also been doing Atlantic salmon, which I've been here for 23 years. We've never really done a landlocked Atlantic salmon program, and Rhode Island was starting to do that. We stocked out a ton of small Atlantic salmon. We want to raise them bigger, but we ran out of room, so we had to stock out some of them. So next year they'll even be bigger. It's something I've always wanted to do here. We tried the restoration program, and that never really worked. But I did think there was a want to have Atlantic salmon in Rhode Island, so that's what we've been doing. We got a pretty good number of them. Hopefully, when we get all the kinks worked out, we'll be able to stock them yearly, at 3 or 4 pounds each.
Oh, that's fantastic. I bet a lot of people listening are going to be really excited to hear that.
That's a plan, but it's going to take us some time. It takes time to raise them that size, and I don't think anyone. I know this year they were between 12 and 16 inches. I know they're smaller than we wish them to be, but without stocking them, we would not be able to get bigger ones. So.
Right, gotcha. You only have so much room.
Right. So hopefully everyone understood that and had fun catching them. I know I caught one, and they definitely the little guy fought and jumped, and
That's
it's great.
fantastic. Well, so how many ponds or locations did you put the salmon in?
We put them in 12 locations this year,
12 locations. Wow.
and we're hoping to expand on that.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow, fantastic. Just that's a great success from the hatcheries.
I think so. It's the first time we've ever done this.
Yeah, wow.
No, people hear stories from years ago when we would stock 15 or even 20-pound salmon into some of these areas, but they were brood stock from the federal government that they were going to either destroy or throw away, and we went up and got. The federal government no longer raises salmon like this anymore, so that's why we dried up. So we have to do it on our own.
Right.
And we will.
Fantastic. So how about those golden trout? I know a lot of people ask about those.
So the golden trout they're a rainbow trout that is the pigment in them turns them yellow, and they have like a red stripe on the side of them. We feed them a special kind of food to get that red to come out. It's got paprika and mixed in the diet. There's other things too, vitamins. They are pretty cool. Their timing works with us because they typically spawn late August, early September, so they're about 3 or 4 weeks earlier than our brook trout and brown trout, so we actually have the room to do this. For years, we were driving down to the state of Pennsylvania to get eggs, and this is where this all started. We were able to raise our own, make our own brood stock, and keep this going. We stock anywhere normally around 4,000 to 5,000 of them a year, sometimes more. They grow pretty fast, like a rainbow. So they do stick out in the ponds, but they are secretly sneaky. You always get those reports of someone catching one in like December and Silver Spring, which is anyone's ever been there. It's a relatively small pond, and it's closer to the ocean, so you would think the egrets or a hawk or something that would spot them and get them, but you always get that report late in the season that someone catches one there. Yeah. So they definitely hide.
You can ask any angler about those, and I'm sure they tell you the same thing. So, are the target trout going out this year?
No, there will be no target trout going out. We did some this spring. We won't have any ready for 2022.
Gotcha, but some did go out during the spring.
Correct.
Gotcha. So okay, so I haven't heard from anybody that's caught one yet, but I know they're amazing.
Yes, which is kind of shocking because they were actually huge this year. They were definitely 2 pounds plus. They were really big, and they fight. They're definitely cool. When we go out there and you feed the fish, you see like they look like piranhas when you feed the fish. But when we feed the tiger trout, you get wet. They go, they splat, they jump after that food. They come right out of the water. They splash. They're definitely a fun fish.
Just really aggressive. Oh, yes. That's really cool. Oh, really neat. So we covered stocking stuff, and we talked about all the hatchery issues and various things about hatchery operations. So one thing that we did get a question from was how can somebody contact, or who can somebody contact, if they had a scouting group or other small group looking to take a tour of the fish hatchery? And I think we kind of said that.
Yes, so we would talk to, you would call here, you would call our education department.
Right, yeah, that would be Kim Sullivan.
Yep. And she would go talk to me, and we would come up with a good time and date, and how big the program is, how much staff we need. We could make it all happen.
Right, fantastic. And what's the largest group that you could accommodate at the hatchery?
We've probably done 100 before.
Wow, that's an amazing number.
Yes, but that takes a little more planning because we need more staff.
Right, gotcha. Yeah. I was thinking for a large group of 20.
No, we once brought in an entire like a preschool, pre-K school, and it probably had about 100 kids.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
So you can really accommodate like almost any size group there.
Yes, and we can always stagger too,
Right.
because we kind of segregate the from the hatch house to the feeding the fish and a little project. So we're able to move kids around, so not everyone's all in one group.
That's great. Yeah, it's fantastic getting kids involved so they're aware of what goes into the environment.
Absolutely, I think we've gotten some fishermen out of this.
Excellent. So, we always ask our guests on the podcast for one funny or memorable story that you might have from working or something from the field. And do you have a story for us?
So it's a good question. So I am sure I'm missing out on a good opportunity for a funny story. But the most memorable thing that I can think of working here is in 2010 when we had the floods at Carolina Hatchery, because Carolina Hatchery is kind of built in a river. And it wasn't funny because it was devastating because the whole bottom half of the hatchery was underwater. But I'm going through a very stressful time in my life. My wife is very pregnant, going through all this. You can't drive to work. So I live in Exeter my entire life. For me to drive to Carolina Hatchery, I had to go up into Warwick through the back roads, back down because I was surrounded by bridges, down to 138 and across. So it took me about 45 minutes to get to Carolina Hatchery.
Wow.
My wife's panicking because she thinks she's in labor, but I had this water everywhere, and we had to shut stuff down before we lost pumps and wells. So I had to go do what had to be done. My wife, we had a baby 2 days later, so she was. It was our second one. I knew I was all right. But yes, that was when the rain stopped, when the water stopped rising, we had to go out into the woods. It was like they made like small ponds, and there was trout there. So the Pawcatuck River because it's the headwater of the Pawcatuck River, the Carolina Hatchery. They were all set for stocking for that year because they got probably about 30,000 fish.
They all got out.
They all got out. They all just swam up and they went. And there was reports of people catching fish in the bay, trout. So they were all pushed out.
That's amazing. Oh, goodness. That's funny. So is there anything else that you might want to mention to our listeners or anything?
Please give us your feedback. Tell us what your fishing hole is. Tell us what fish you like fishing for. We do know people want to have more variety. We are working on that. That is something we are constantly working on every day to make sure we're able to put different species in different spots. But we really need to know where you go fishing and why you go fishing there, because that would help us make sure we locate those proper places to put fish in.
See, that's fantastic. I can't think of like any other part of government that's really more interested in trying to make things better and provide more opportunities for somebody in their pastime or their hobby. So that's just amazing that you're out there and you're so willing to listen to people and you want that feedback from everybody just to, again, make things better for everyone.
Absolutely.
Well, that's really cool. Well, Casey, thank you for coming on the podcast this month. We really appreciated having you, and it was great talking with you. So for all of our listeners, make sure we tune in next month, where we're going to be speaking with the Chief of the Division of Marine Fisheries in Rhode Island, Connor McManus, who's going to be talking to us about the shark presence here in Rhode Island and a collaborative project between the Division of Marine Fisheries, the Atlantic Shark Institute, and the University of Rhode Island to track shark movement through Rhode Island waters. So a real timely subject we're going to have there. So we'll also have more questions from our listeners. And again, if you have any questions for any guests that we have on our podcast or any of our staff, you can feel free to email me at scott.travers@dem.ri.gov. And again, please subscribe and share this podcast. We'll be back next month with another exciting podcast and more questions for the people that we speak with.